National Executive Committee meeting that took place yesterday, but more importantly, to communicate the decisions to the public and to the members of the Federation and its affiliates. One of the most important things we must note at the outset is that those journalists joining us via Zoom, you can write your questions via the chat platform on Zoom, and those who are joining us via Facebook, you can leave your comments and your questions on the wall chat of the Facebook page, which is being broadcast, of course, broadcasted live via our Facebook page on Saftu. And the comrades who are in the room, or journalists who are in the room who would like to ask questions, can do so by raising questions, and I will note them and pass them to the leadership of the Federation. At the current moment, I will give to Comrade Vusin Jangas, who is the General Secretary. Okay. Before I do that, let me introduce the leadership of the Federation. These are two NOBs and other members of the NEC who have joined this press briefing as leadership in their respective affiliates. From my right, you have Comrade Vuga Ngongo, who is the Deputy General Secretary of FAU. You have Comrade Max Makubela, the Comrade President of VIEW. You have the General Secretary of the Federation, Comrade Zulinzi Mavavi. You have Comrade Nomvume Khalakhala, the First Deputy President of the Federation. You have Comrade Mwekezi Lepiani, who is the President of ICTU. You have Comrade Vusin Jangase, who is the General Secretary, as I've said, of the TAU, the Democratic Transport and Allied Workers Union. Then you have Comrade Adwell Nazo, who is the President of the Food and Allied Workers Union of South Africa, FAU. And then you have Comrade Jane Muguni, who is the leadership of ABSA. And then you have Comrade Stephen Mutingwa, who is the General Secretary of TASU. You have Comrade Soli Malema, who is the General Secretary of NUPSO. And you have Comrade Mwerani Malulega from VIEW, the General Secretary of VIEW. And then lastly, you have Comrade Spiwe Gabel, who is the Deputy President of NUPSO. Now, upon this introduction, I will give and hand over to Comrade Vos, who will read our official statement, and thereafter I will take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Trevor, and good morning, comrades, and good morning to the media. As a prefix, I must say that this is a Saftu press briefing, as Comrade Trevor has just indicated. It's not a briefing of a concerned group. It's a briefing of the National Executive Committee, and the briefing is constituted by the members as they have been introduced. They have been assigned to come here today and assist in communicating the decisions of the National Executive Committee. So they have been duly mandated and authorized by the NEC. And the statement that I will be reading to you now has been sanctioned by the National Executive Committee. I'm clarifying this because in the past few days, we were on the media presenting our own statement as concerned affiliates. So I'm clarifying because that might have created a bit of confusion and people might think that it's a continuation of that. No. The statement of the Saftu National Executive Committee reads as follows. Saftu National Executive Committee held its first quarterly meeting from 24 to 26 March 2022. The NEC is constituted by 6 national office bearers of the Federation, and a minimum of 2 delegates to a maximum of 6 delegates, depending on the size of membership of each affiliate, and 2 delegates from every province of Saftu. All Saftu NOBs, affiliated unions and provincial leaders were present in the meeting. The NEC discussed the recent 2 weeks of turmoil that engulfed the Federation. This followed the decision of the National Office Bearers of the Federation to place the General Secretary, Comrade Zwelinzima Vavi, on a suspension. Every day since this decision, which was wholly unconstitutional, the Federation, that is seen by many workers in our country and elsewhere in the world as a militant alternative and a campaigning federation, hogged the headlines for all the wrong reasons. And the NEC has characterized this as unfortunate, painful, and regrettable. Following an intense and robust headlines for all of the following an intense and robust discussions amongst the delegates, which lasted for many hours on the constitutionality of the NOBC decision to suspend the General Secretary, Comrade Zwelinzima Vavi. A motion was moved to suspend the 4 national office bearers of Saftu that orchestrated such a suspension. Following further deliberations on the motion and consideration on other alternatives, the matter was eventually put on a vote. The overwhelming members of the NEC decided to place 4 of the NOBs on a suspension immediately, effective yesterday, the 26th of March 2022. The view of the NEC is that the 4 comrades willfully and deliberately usurped the powers of the NEC and acted ultra vires in suspending the General Secretary. In the process, they brought the Federation into disrepute. For 2 weeks, the Federation was subjected to ridicule and utter embarrassment. The National Executive Committee further viewed the suspension or intent to suspend as absolutely mischievous and malicious act that sought to portray and smear the Saftu General Secretary as a corrupt individual. 14 Saftu affiliates wrote letters to the President to request an audience with the President so that they could be taken into confidence by the NOBs. All these letters were ignored. The President would not even acknowledge the receipt of these letters. Yet the same President continued to appear on almost every news channel defending the suspension or the intent to suspend. The NEC has characterized this behavior and conduct of the President as nothing else but a disruptive act. Despite being told that the NOBs do not have such powers, neither in the Constitution nor in the policy, to suspend each other, which we have called this as a form of cannibalism. In terms of the Saftu Constitution, the power to suspend any of the national office bearer exclusively resides with the National Executive Committee, and this is contained in the Constitution of Saftu. According to clause 3.3.5, which deals with the powers of the NEC, the Saftu NEC may, and I read the clause in the Constitution, suspend any office bearer or official of the federation for sufficient cause until the matter is decided at the next meeting of the central executive of the central committee. So there is no ambiguity in the constitution of Saftu as to where the power to suspend resides. Furthermore, Chapter 9 of the Saftu Constitution under Clause 121 states that the NEC may demand the recall of any national, provincial, local office bearer or who serve on any outside body if such is demanded by 2/3 of the affiliates. If 1211, the matter violates the constitution of the member, violates the constitution of the federation in any way, brings it into disrepute. 1212. If the federation considers the person is working against the best interest of the federation. The powers of the national office bearers are regulated in the constitution of Saftu. For specific reasons, Clause 6 under 611 states that the national office bearers have powers less than those of the National Executive Committee in principle. And that is why the National Executive Committee has described the Act of the National Office Bearers and the other 4 National Office Bearers as a delinquent act. In the meeting, the National Office Bearers were given an ample time to explain their act regarding their conduct, to explain themselves regarding their conduct. Every NOB and the president later apologized on behalf of the NOBs as a collective. What's happening here, Trevor? Sorry? Your logo is interfering with your statement. Thank you very much. Sorry for that. In this NEC meeting, the national office bearers were given ample time to explain themselves regarding their conduct. Even when the president later apologized on behalf of the NOBs as a collective, his apology lacked an appreciation of the extent to which the federation has been embarrassed and its image damaged by their actions. The NEC also considered the turmoil in the context of a leadership crisis disunity that has gone for a very long time. The national office bearers have been given in the past an opportunity after another to lead the federation into a different direction than the one of squabbles. Dozens of hours have been spent and resources of the organization wasted in facilitated discussions to get everyone to understand the constitution, the roles of each NOB member as per the constitution. Yet, even before the ink could dry, the organization is placed back to square one due to these actions. For 4 years, the young federation could not be what it promised its members to become, an independent but not a political formation that is truly democratic, campaigning, militant and fighting. For example, workers at the state-owned enterprises, including Daniel, Petro SA, and everywhere else affected by capitalist restructuring of their enterprises to streamline them for maximization of profit, have been left on their own as the leadership of the Federation paralyzed our movement. The attacks on the working class continues unabated as the organization is defocused by internal leadership meaningless squabbles. Instead of taking its commitment to the Working Class Summit in 2018, the paralysis had cut deep such that it prevented the Federation to play its historic role, to catalyze the unity of the working class movement and take the lead in the campaigns against austerity cuts. The Federation that promised a new beginning has as a result been left to look just like others. The membership of the Federation has been stagnated as leadership prioritized battles against each other, instead of building the Federation quantitatively and qualitatively. Saftu had set out to recruit and organize the unorganized workers, who now constitute 77% of the total workforce, so as to grow and strengthen its position at the shop floor and politically. Quantitatively, Saftu had set out to groom a cadre guided by principles of anti-corruption and whose level of class consciousness grows to the point of rendering a holistic critique of the political economy of capitalism and other preceding historical epochs. This would not only allow our members to transcend the misogynistic, narrow nationalistic, and other forms of bigotry, but will make such a trade union cadre an active militant fighter for a progressive society. A militant trade union cadre who, instead of serving his or her interest, puts those of a just society at the helm. Though having been delayed by the internal squabbles, these objectives are not altogether lost to the Federation. The past 2 weeks of terrible publicity that has undoubtedly damaged the image of the Federation was one battlefront in which the National Executive Committee sought to realign and steer the Federation towards its central objectives. It was from this background that the National Executive Committee decided to place its President, Meg Chavalala, Second Deputy President, Thabo Matsuse, the National Treasurer, Motshware Lechogo, and the Deputy General Secretary, Moleko Paketi, on immediate suspension in line with Clause 3.3.5 of the Saftu Constitution. The NEC vowed to defend this decision to the last court of the land, if it needs be. The National Executive Committee has consciously decided that it will defend this decision to the last court of the land, if needs be. I'm repeating this because there has been some insinuation and threats that the decision of the NEC could be subjected to litigation processes. As some who defend the right of the NOBs to suspend each other threatened to take the Federation to court, I therefore hereby present the National Executive Press Statement as indicated earlier on by Trevor, that we will be taking questions and collectively as a block assigned by the National and Executive Committee will be answering to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Comrade GS. We have now come to the end of the official statement of the Federation, which has been read by Comrade Vus. And I would open for those who have questions in-house first, to pose their questions to the leadership, and the leadership would answer. And we would proceed to the online platforms, both Facebook and Zoom account, to ensure that we also attend to any questions that may be arising from there. Thank you. In-house, I have two questions. You state your name and your newsroom, and then pose the question, and then we would follow with answers.
All right, thank you, Trevor. My name is Katlego Lerodi. I'm from Newsroom Africa. I just wanted to check in with the office bearers there on the podium if this suspension is an indefinite suspension, if those the president and other office bearers that have been suspended have an opportunity to appeal that suspension. And if so, then is that platform open for them? And I also wanted to check in as well with the issues that were raised around Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi. There was issues around the abuse of finances of the Federation. What happens to those concerns that were raised by the office bearers? Are they disregarded? Are you going to be investigating those concerns? And then where to from here, where those are concerned?
Thank you very much. Com? The opportunity is yours. Oh.
Thank you. Slindelo Masigane from ENCA. I just wanted to follow up with the suspensions. How long are they for? Also, when will we see the disciplinary hearings commence? And are you not concerned about any breakaways from the Federation stemming from this decision that you've just announced? And just for Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, does he feel vindicated?
Thanks. I have comrades who have been assigned to answer questions to the media by the NEC. I'm thinking that it is these comrades who would also attend to these questions. Comrade, should I start with you, Comrade Vus? Okay. You will pass the mic.
No, thank you, Trevor. Let me start with Katlego. The Constitution of the Federation, the clause we have referred to, clause 3.3.5, says that the National Executive Committee has got the powers to suspend. And after suspension, it is only the Central Committee of the Federation that can bring the matter into its finality. And the NEC has done what it could within its powers of as contained in the Constitution. So the coming Central Committee, which sits twice in between national congresses, which has had one late last year, will receive a report on the matter and decide on a way forward. So the NEC does not have powers to institute charges and the disciplinary inquiry on the suspended leaders. It can only be the Central Committee that does that, which will receive a report from the National Executive Committee. So the suspension is pending until the convening of the Central Committee, which will be decided by the NEC, because it is the NEC that convenes the CC, and therefore the matter will be concluded at the CC. Because the NEC is probably, it's important that we emphasize this, that the NEC is not a charging body. It is not a disciplinary committee. It can be a player and a referee on the matter. The best it could do is what is contained in the Constitution. Part of the suspension of the leadership, or central to the suspension of the leadership, is the violation of the Constitution of the Federation. So the NEC cannot be seen to be venturing into a further possible violation of the Constitution. So we will wait for the Central Committee to receive the report on the matter and take appropriate decision. The second question is in relation to what was contained in the imminent precocious suspension letter by the President, that amongst the accusation is the abuse of financial resources. And in answering this question, we must say that, and we have said in the NEC, actually it's a position of the NEC, that the Federation remains opposed to corruption and abuse of workers' resources. Unfortunately, financial matters are matters that are handled by FinCom. And FinCom did not present a report on the matters that were raised by the President. So the National Executive Committee has asked FinCom to go and establish if is there anything irregular on the transactions of the Federation and bring a report back to the NEC for consideration. But I can confirm now that the NEC was not provided by any form of irregularity in as far as financial transactions are concerned. So FinCom has been assigned to look into the matter and bring the report back to the NEC for consideration if there is anything to consider. The second question, Ms. Lindile, how long is the suspension going to take? The suspension will take for as long as the Central Committee has not set. We don't know when will the Central Committee sit. The Central Committee is convened by the NEC, which the NEC is now preoccupied by the overwhelming task of preparing for the National Congress of the Federation, which will be sitting in almost a month from now, around May. So we have not, as the NEC, discussed when to convene such a central committee. Like I have said, that in less than 6 months, probably late last year, we convened a central committee, and the Constitution says that the central committee takes place twice in between congresses. So there is no talks in the Federation now of convening the Central Committee. That is likely to happen after the National Congress. So pending the Central Committee, the suspension of the 4 comrades stands. Well, the last question is our attitude, probably an anticipation on a possible breakaway. Well, we do not think that instituting a disciplinary, instilling an organizational discipline in the leadership will transcend into a breakaway. If we begin to answer that question, we will be venturing into another place. So we do not anticipate that, because we think that the leadership that have been placed on suspension subscribe to the Saftu organizational discipline. They would not drive a breakaway on the basis of the suspension. They are not dismissed, they are not expelled, they are suspended. It could be that the Central Committee may decide otherwise on their suspension. We don't know, and I don't know. So to sit now and begin to enter into presumptions as to whether or not this could lead to this or that, it will be unfair to the Federation, to the NEC, and unfair to the comrades. And I'm going to hand over to other comrades who may want to further add.
Yes, comrade, we want to amplify on the issue of alleged financial misconduct. The NEC has given, like the statement is saying, to the latter suspended comrades to explain themselves. The issue of the financial misconduct was not or could not be passed to the NEC to say exactly what could have transpired. However, the FinCom members who should scrutinize the transactions and give a report to the NEC knew nothing about this transaction. And that has led to our president apologizing or admitting an error. Now, with all these things not being justifiable by the NOBs in question, this has brought the NEC to say this was a witch hunt. And like we said, the apology was not accepted because it lacks credibility. So that in the face of the NEC, the letter of intended or of suspending the General Secretary, clearly it was not based on the issues that are raised on the letter, but probably something else. Hence, the comrade has been suspended.
No, thank you. One area which really we want to emphasize on and also dispel the notion that says we are defending Zwelinzima Vavi. That's a wrong thing. Actually, it must be condemned because we are not defenders of anybody. We are defending the federation. And where a corruption is, because we are totally against corruption in this federation. And when FinCom sits and go through actually the document and find out that there are discrepancies, there are issues that whether whoever who must account, they will account on those issues and will act if we discover that a particular thing has went wrong on finances of the federation. We are not there for anybody. We are there to protect the constitution and the finances of this organization. When that item comes, because what these NOPs did, they just jump into the issue which it was not their terrain. The matter was supposed to go to FinCom for it to investigate and bring a report into the NEC, which that didn't happen. We are not protecting anybody. We'll be firm on all the issues of the federation, worse off in the issues of finances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Comrade Trevor. I think you may recall, as members of the media, that there were figures branded around in the media in the tune of about 65,000 that was allegedly spent from the credit card or the debit card of the Federation. Just for the records, no one of those national office bearers present in the NEC ventured to speak about that, and therefore the NEC could not even discuss that particular aspect because of there's no official report from the structure that is required to do so in the NEC. Clearly, from the happenings in the NEC and days preceding the NEC, it was apparent that the national office bearers acted hastily and acted prematurely by suspending and or intending to suspend the General Secretary on allegations that were not tested and that were not presented before
the FinCom, and that they could not as well justify in the NEC because of they did not follow due processes. I just wanted to deal with that aspect, Trevor, because the rest I think Vusi has dealt with and so on.
Yeah, thank you very much. We also want to emphasize the point that we are not defending anyone, but we are defending the principle. No matter how big you are in this organization, if you dare touch workers' money, we will deal with you in line with the constitution and the policies of the organization. And in this case, the issue that, or these unfounded allegations that were raised by the NOBs, the correct procedure was that FinCom will deal with this matter, compile a proper report with recommendation, and present it before the NEC. And the only structure that have the powers to suspend is the NEC. There's no other structure. Hence, we are saying we are not fighting or defending anyone. So we are fighting for a principle. Thank you.
Thanks.
Trevor, before, there was a question specifically directed to the General Secretary, whether he feels vindicated. So I'm not sure if Congress really want to deal with that question. I think it's fair that he does.
Thank you, Silindile. And let me say this. I, as a person, and in my official position as the General Secretary, and together with all of the members of the National Executive Committee that sat between the 24th and the 26th of March, are not rejoicing that 4 national office bearers have been suspended. We do regard this as a very sad chapter in a very short history of an organization that was created precisely to move trade unions away from things like this that were happening everywhere else. Almost every union sitting around the table would have left organizations that they have built, some of them from inception, precisely because of these shenanigans of suspensions without fair hearings, of factional guillotining, cutthroat politics, smear campaigns, character assassinations, bodyguards and bouncers evicting members in their constitutional meetings, and the takeover of the constitutions by non-members hired by the leadership to disrupt the unity of the organization in order to protect the individual interests of the leadership. We moved away from those to create a Saftu based on 9 founding principles. Now that we're finding ourselves in this situation, we regret it. And I regret it. And all of us that are here, together with the members of the National Executive Committee, have said that this is perhaps the darkest hour in the Federation, who have been disfocused away from the real issues workers were expecting a young federation to deal with. No, we're not feeling vindicated in any way. We are not happily rejoicing. We are not in any way going to say, oh yeah, who do you think you were? No, not at all. We believe that this matter should have not arisen had we been focusing on campaigns, on building the organization, on recruiting, on educating our affiliates in line with our service charter commitments, on building their political confidence, in particular where we are now under such an immense attack from the other side that is launching an attack after an attack on the working class. And those should have been the issues that we are convening this press conference about. And it's a pity that sometimes a young organization have to confront challenges such as the challenge we are now confronting. But challenges have to be confronted. And I am bounded and I'm in full support of the decisions of the National Executive Committee. But I cannot be rejoicing and I cannot be very happy at the moment that is really putting the Federation in such a bad light and in such a disrepute. No, we're not rejoicing at all.
Thanks, General Secretary. I will be in the background, and our audience on Zoom and on our television screens must forgive me. The voice is still that of the national spokesperson, Comrade Trevor Shagu. The reason I'm in the background is so that I can be able to read the questions that are coming from Zoom and our Facebook. On our Zoom platform, we have a question from Clifford, Jacaranda FM News. First question: was NUMSA part of the collective decision to suspend the 4 NOBs? Just to repeat it, was NUMSA part of the collective decision to suspend the 4 NOBs? That is from our colleague Clifford, Jacaranda FM. The second question is from a comrade of SABU, I think, a member of SABU, is asking who is acting or who are acting in the absence. Maybe to complete, because it's not complete. Who are acting in their absence, meaning those who are suspended. The second question is, are they still gonna get their stipend? I think he's referring to those who are suspended still. Are they still gonna get their stipend? Then we have a hand. I'm just gonna put the mic onto the speaker so that the comrade is Comrade Sophie, or colleague Sophie rather. Sophie Mukwena, SABC. They have their hand up, so I'll just put this here and then comrades can listen. The sound might not be too good, but listen to this. Comrade Sophie, you have a chance now. You can speak.
Okay, I'm Sophie Mukwena from the SABC International News Editor, but the first question will be local. In terms of what has transpired within the Federation now, it comes at a time where workers around the country are really struggling. I mean, retrenchment due to the economic challenges, but above all, the COVID-19. Are you not embarrassed as people who are supposed to be trying to assist workers to come out of this challenge? And not only your federation, other federations as well. It looks like it's a question of workers, you are on your own, while leaders are fighting for positions. And then the second issue is directed to Ntatevazi. Ntatevazi, do you think that the issue of political interference in the workers' federations around the country is still an issue that leads to this kind of challenges? And lastly, the crisis in Ukraine, how will it impact on the workers in particular? Because we have heard that it is going to have a serious economic impact on countries, particularly issues that are related to food production, and what are you doing to help to cushion workers against the storm that is coming? Because of course COVID-19 we were found wanting because it was a pandemic, no one expected it. But what are we doing now to prepare ourselves to protect workers when there are serious challenges?
Thanks, Sophie. I will hand over to the leadership of the Federation to deal with the questions that have been raised. Maybe there might be arising questions in-house before you proceed to answer. Can I take the questions in-house and then we can proceed to answer? Or after? Okay, thanks. You can proceed to answer.
No, thank you, Trevor. If I may start, comrades. Clifford from Jacaranda FM is asking whether or not one of Saftu affiliates, NOMSA, was part of the meeting and part of the collective in taking the decision to place the leadership on suspension. We can confirm that our sister affiliates, NOMSA, was part of the National Executive Committee from day one to the last day of the meeting. We can also confirm that, unfortunately, NOMSA was not in good standing. What does that mean? It means that they did not have a constitutional right to move motions and second or vote, but they had all their speaking rights. This is important that to repeat, they had all their speaking rights in the NEC and they participated in the debates throughout the meeting. It's just that at the voting point, they couldn't vote because they were not in good standing. They were not in good standing because their payment for subscription came outside the parameters of the constitutional dictates. But we can confirm that they participated in the debates throughout. There is a member from SAPO who is asking about the vacuum and what are we doing about it. Now that there are 4 office bearers who would have been placed on suspension, the National Executive Committee took a decision that the leadership of affiliates must be allowed to retreat and go back to their unions and consult on the best way forward on the matter. And because the constitution of Saftu does not give explicit clarity on how do you deal with instances like this, the NEC further mandated the national office bearers of the Federation to, on an urgent basis, seek a legal opinion on how best to deal with the issue of the 4 vacant positions. Whether, as the NEC, we've got the constitutional authority to replace or not. And whilst answering this question, maybe it's important to clarify that we are here as members of the NEC, assigned by the NEC for purposes of communicating the NEC decision on this matter. We are not de facto office bearers of the Federation. As we speak now, the Federation has got 2 active office bearers, and that is Comrade Zwelinzima Vavi, the General Secretary, and Comrade Nomvume Khalakhala, the first Deputy President, who by virtue of the Constitution has inherently assumed the role of the President. Because the Constitution of the Federation is very clear that in instances where the President is not available to perform his or her duties, the next available person assumes the role. So at least at that level, there is clarity on the Constitution. But on the other one, I think I have already explained. So the NEC has decided that within the next 7 to 14 days, there is going to be a further meeting of the NEC to reflect on this important matter which a SAPU member is asking. And we hope by then the Secretariat would have secured the legal opinion. We have agreed that the legal opinion must be circulated to affiliates for internal consultation amongst affiliates and for mandate seeking going to that meeting. So as things stand now, Saftu has got only 2 active office bearers. Sophie, well, connecting from our statement, the statement itself does characterize these developments as very painful developments, very regrettable, and highly unfortunate. It is unfortunate that Saftu is finding ourselves in this situation, more so when the working class is battered left and right, is squeezed left and right by capital, working together with the ANC-led government. It is times like this that the country requires strong, militant, solid workers' organizations. It is in that context that we say that it is unfortunate that in the mid of a crisis when unemployment has reached unprecedented levels, Saftu find itself dealing with internal squabbles when we are supposed to be on the street, marching side by side with our members, trying to push back the frontiers of poverty. But there was nothing we could do when there was a clear act of violation of the Constitution of the Federation. Because the Constitution is what brings us together as affiliates. So anyone who tramples on it is actually challenging the going concern of the Federation. So there was no way we could allow this matter slide. But we can't sit here and face workers and say this moment is the right moment. It's a moment that it's gonna go down in the history as one of the very painful moments in the life of Saftu, in the light of what I have said and considering what the Saftu General Secretary said earlier on. I'm going to...
No, let's, I think we should maybe have one comment and then give to the Comrade General Secretary to answer the specific questions. Just one comment.
It's just one question which actually talks to the federations under the current political situation confronting the working class and the workers directly. It is high time now that as workers from all these federations to unite and fight with one voice in terms of really trying to push back actually the current situation that is prevailing, confronting workers in this country. Thank you.
Thanks, Comrade Adwell. Comrade General Secretary, may you answer the specific questions which were directed to you?
Is there political interference from outside the Federation? All I can say, Sophie Mukwena of the SAPC, is this. Saftu is a political animal. It's a political entity. And every political entity, political animal, is a contested terrain. Every one of us here, as the leadership of this federation, are in our own individual capacity being contested. We are being contested. We are a contested terrain. The Federation Saftu is a contested terrain. Every one of its affiliates are contesting the Federation and want to design it in terms of their own ambitions. The Federation becomes what it is following those intense contestations internally, such that it can then agree on a constitution that should bind all of its affiliates, agree on principles, agree on policies that binds all individuals who form part of the federation. We are a contested terrain. Every contested terrain will be contested, and every institution that is political in nature is being contested. Saftu is being contested by external forces. There's no doubt about it. Organizations that are outside the federation seek to influence the organization alongside of their own images and ambitions. They will want the federation to do what they will want it to do in line with their own political ambitions. And those contests do play a role in the life of any organization, Saftu included. No political institution outside the Federation Saftu would not want to influence it to be like them and to be amenable to what those organizations represent in society. So yes, those contests will always impact on the life of the Federation, even when it has declared itself to be independent from the employers, in particular the public and the private sector, to be independent from any political party, and yet to be not apolitical. So we are a contested terrain. We will be contested all the time. Our challenge is to unite these unions to defend the consensus after that contest have taken place. That's her responsibility as the acting president to defend the line. If there is a Congress resolution on any matter, if there is a Central Committee decision on any matter, if there is a National Executive Committee decision on any matter, her prime responsibility is to defend that line. And that line may not be popular with some of its unions or some of the individuals within the unions, but it is the line that unites these unions behind a political entity called Saftu. All of us here have that fiducial responsibility to defend the line. And in the course of us defending the line, we become celebrated as principled cadres by those who agree, and we become hated, and hated intensely for defending the correct positions adopted by the collective of the federation. And that dynamic is unavoidably part and parcel of a life of any organization. Now, on the question you are asking about Ukraine, The reason why these NEC members and the NEC is so angry and was so angry was that the Federation is being diverted away from the challenges facing the working class here in South Africa and elsewhere in the world by internal NOB squabbles that are just not ending. 4 years now. And the statements explain that. We did not even have an opportunity to discuss Ukraine and the war between Russia and Ukraine and the possibilities that we may be plunged into a third world war where chemical weapons may be used to the destruction of the entire humankind. We didn't even arrive at that point, and we are being distracted by all of what is happening in the public terrain. The report that we presented, which was subjected or was going to be a subject to a debate in the National Executive Committee, says the following. It says that we as the working class choose no side between imperialist forces contesting each other through the war that is unfolding in Ukraine. We have no friend in the working class called Vladimir Putin. Instead, we have a butcher of the working class in Russia, which we stand in solidarity with. We have no friend with the called NATO coalescing in support of Ukraine. Instead, we stand in solidarity with the working class in Ukraine, who are now the victims of a territorial battle between imperialist forces using their country as a battlefront. These people are not the friends of the working class. We are inspired by what Rosa Luxemburg and Vladimir Lenin would have said when they were responding to the First World War that broke out in the 1920s and in the beginning of the 1930s. The imperialist wars must unfold. The working class must unite against a battle that we must fight at the local level. And the battle that we must fight in America, in Ukraine, in Russia, in South Africa, in our continent, is a battle to defeat the system, the capitalist system, the imperialist system that is leading to the wars that we are seeing in there. Our fight is at the local level to defeat a system that have subjugated the working class everywhere. We didn't discuss the consequences of that war. And those consequences are out there for everybody not to see, but to feel. An interest rate hike have just happened, and it means that any worker who have a car, who have a bonded home, who have any kind of an installment with any furniture shop will now feel the pain. We are already feeling the pain. The commodity prices have gone up since the battle that have started between Russia and Ukraine, supported by the rest of the Western imperialist forces. As a result of that, we now had a situation where our country, where we're finding us to pay 22 rands for a liter of petrol and diesel. Unprecedented. The price of paraffin is shooting the roof. And the price of the gas is shooting the roof. And who is benefiting from that? Not the working class, but the warlords that are fighting there on behalf of their capitalist handlers. Life is beginning to be totally unbearable in South Africa. As we normally say, we have been in a crisis before each and every crisis that is unfolding, a capitalist crisis, imperialist crisis. And we are being squeezed. And as you can see, The working class, unfortunately, is beginning to turn against each other. Last week, there was a war between the nationals of Lesotho and Zimbabwe in some part of the Western Cape in Robertson. Here, every day, we're watching people marching in the streets of Johannesburg, Soweto, taking the war, not against the capitalist forces that are squeezing life out of them, but taking it against their fellow brothers and sisters, and even their fellow South Africans, accusing them of being drug lords. And we are right in the life of vigilantism. And vigilantism knows no law and order. It is a state of a nation in anarchy and in desperation. And that's where Saftu comes from. And that's why workers said that this federation is their last hope. And that's why the NEC was so angry that we are being diverted away from those battles into internal strife in order to defeat the agenda of getting the federation to be what it is or what it promised workers it will be.
Thanks, Comrade General Secretary. I'm going to take the last round, both from the, if there's any question that leadership would not have dealt with adequately, they would have a chance to do so in this last round. But I will take our last round of hands from our colleagues in-house, but also our colleagues on Facebook and Zoom. If there are no questions on Facebook and Zoom, I'll proceed to take those questions in-house. I'll start with you, my brother.
Thanks, Travis. Katlaholo again from Newsroom Africa. I just wanted to check in with you regarding the vote. You say that the matter to suspend the 4 office bearers was put through a vote. Can you just break it down for us in terms of how you reached the conclusion to suspend the national office bearers? And you are speaking, of course, as well about NUMSA not being in good standing with the federation, hence they could not be part of the voting process. Maybe just shed clarity further in terms of why they're not in good standing. Does this mean that going forward they still have an opportunity to fix themselves and come forward so that they can form part of other discussions and valuable discussions and decisions by the federation? Just give clarity on NUMSA, because as much as we understand it, most of them were not happy regarding what is happening, and especially the move by those 14 federations, organizations to come forward and say that they are slamming the actions of the president, now suspended president.
Thanks, Katleho. My sister?
Oh, I have a mic, thanks. Uslinde Lomasigane once more from ENCA. Mr. Vavi, I just want you to clarify what your relationship is with NUMSA's urban gym, because we're seeing reports that these so-called trumped-up charges against you stem from this soured relationship between the two of you. So are you guys okay? Like, is everything okay there with you and Mr. Jim? And also, NUMSA not being in good standing, is it because Saftu refuses to endorse their political party?
Thank you.
How much of that has to do with the alleged conflict between the two of you? But is there a conflict? Let's just start there.
Thanks very much. Leadership, I would give you the opportunity to respond. No, there's nothing on Zoom and Facebook. I will give the leadership an opportunity to respond, and this will be our final. So comrades must be as substantive as possible. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. I think on the first question around voting, we must simply say the Constitution of the Federation, when they are to effect clause 3.3.5, they do so through simple majority. In this case, members of the NEC, in their majority, voted for suspension of the four mentioned national office bearers. We will choose not to get into the details as to how many voted for this and how many voted for that, because of that on its own is divisive. The second issue of NUMSA not being in good standing, I think the Constitution of the Federation prescribes that affiliates pay subscription at a particular date of the month, and those that pays after that, and there is a coming meeting of the National Executive Committee or any other meeting, they may not be accorded the rights in terms of that particular constitution. And amongst those particular rights, it is the right to vote and the right to move motion and second motion. So it was not only NUMSA, by the way, and we must not be singling out NUMSA as if there is any special about it. There are other affiliates that were as well not in good standing, and they did not as well participate, though present in the NEC. On the issue of the relationship of Ivan, Jim, and Vavi, I think Comrade Vavi will answer that. But I would like him to stay away from personalities. Here we are dealing with the NEC decision regarding the suspended office bearers. If comrades who were friends before decided to terminate friendship, that should not be brought into the constitutional structures of the federation. But insofar as it affects the political party that allegedly Comrade Vavi did not support, I think this matter it was dealt with in the past. Our view is that the matter of that particular political party, it is debated among many other political parties within the federation. And in our last central committee, we did not arrive at a decision, and therefore this matter, it is meant to proceed to our conference. But our view in our majority is that the founding principle of this federation were clear insofar as aligning politically with political parties. We majority of these affiliates that constituted Saftu, some of them, they were in COSATU, and the COSATU alliance with the ANC basically affected them at that particular level. Hence, one key principle that Saftu subscribed to, it is independency. And for us, therefore, when we debate the issue of a political party, it must be in compliance with the principle of independency that the conference of Saftu has adopted. Thank you.
Thanks, Comrade Steve. Is there any comrade who would like to make additions? Okay. Comrade President, do you want to make any additions? I'm going to close now. Okay, this brings us to an end of our press briefing, and we thank everybody who joined us via Zoom, via Facebook.
My question was not answered.
Oh, okay. Let me, before closing then, allow comrades to make a response Uh,
No, I didn't want to give Silindile a new headline of that will personalize the whole matter of the National Executive Committee. The National Executive Committee have spoken, and through the task team that have been established by the National Executive Committee to communicate a decision of the National Executive Committee on the suspension of the 4 national office bearers of the Federation. We should keep it there. That's why I was not keen to answer that question of what is my relationship between, or what is the relationship between the Saftu General Secretary and the NUMSA General Secretary. No, I think we should not engage on that discussion. There is a decision of the NEC that have absolutely nothing to do with the relationship between the General Secretary of Saftu and the General Secretary of NUMSA. And we should keep it to what the statement is about. There is no even an insinuation in the statement that actually what we are addressing here is a sour relationship between these two friends. Thank you.
My colleague, are you fine?
I'll take it. I'll get him another day. It's okay.
Okay, let me thank officially